The Texas sun had only just begun to rise when Benjamin Carter pulled into the long-term parking lot at Dallas-Fort Worth International Airport. His old pickup truck, a 1998 Ford, rattled gently to a stop. It looked out of place among the line of glossy black SUVs and sleek luxury sedans that glittered in the morning light. Benjamin shut off the engine, stepped out, and stretched his back. His jeans were faded from years of use, his boots scuffed, and his beige shirt tucked neatly beneath a worn leather belt. In one hand, he carried a weathered duffel bag, the same one he'd taken on every trip since the 1980s. He didn't look like a man with a private jet waiting for him on the tarmac. He looked like what he'd always been, a worker of the land. Benjamin was 68, though his shoulders still carried the quiet strength of a lifetime spent under the Texas sun. His skin was bronzed, his hands rough, and his eyes, a deep, patient blue, carried the kind of peace that can't be bought, only lived. As he walked toward the terminal, he nodded to a janitor sweeping the floor. "Morning, brother," he said softly. The janitor smiled, surprised. "Morning to you, sir." Benjamin tipped his hat. "Lord bless your day." Most people just rushed past the janitor without seeing him. But Benjamin had been that man once. Inside, the airport was waking up, rolling suitcases, overhead announcements, the smell of coffee drifting through polished corridors. Benjamin checked the time. 6:42 a.m. His pilot, Captain Ryan Thompson, would be waiting soon at the private terminal to take him to Brazil. It wasn't just another business trip. He was going to visit the small village near São Paulo where he'd been born, the same place where, as a sickly child, his biological parents had handed him over to two American missionaries who couldn't have children of their own. It had been decades since he'd last set foot there, but his heart had never left. He approached the VIP terminal quietly, his duffel strap slung over his shoulder. The sign on the glass doors read, "Private members and executive guests only." Benjamin smiled to himself. "Well, that's me, I suppose." He stepped inside. The air conditioning hummed softly. Plush leather seats lined the waiting area. A few businessmen in tailored suits sipped espresso, eyes glued to their phones. Behind the marble counter, a young receptionist looked up, her smile fading slightly when she saw him. Sir," she said carefully, "this lounge is for VIP guests only." Benjamin nodded politely. "Yes, ma'am. I've got access." She blinked, unconvinced. "May I see your credentials?" Benjamin handed her a sleek black membership card. Carter Air Access, embossed with his own name. She frowned. "This looks homemade," he chuckled softly. "I assure you, it's not." Just then, a tall man in a security uniform stepped forward. His name tag read Derek. "Everything okay here?" Derek asked, sizing Benjamin up. The receptionist shrugged. "He's claiming to be a VIP member, but what?" Benjamin asked kindly. She hesitated. "It's unusual." Derek folded his arms. "Sir, I'm gonna have to ask you to wait outside while we verify that." Benjamin tilted his head slightly. "Outside?" "Yes, sir. This area is for executives and private clients. We'll call you if your information checks out." Benjamin smiled faintly. "Young man, I'm not here to cause trouble. Just waiting for my pilot." Derek's brows rose. "Your pilot?" "Yes, sir," Benjamin said calmly. "He should be here any minute." Derek smirked. "Sure thing, cowboy. And I'm flying Air Force One later." Several of the lounge guests chuckled quietly, sipping their coffee. Benjamin didn't flinch. He just nodded once and said, "You have a blessed day, son." He turned and started toward the seating area. But Derek stepped in front of him. "Hold on, I said you can't sit here." Benjamin paused. "And I said I'm not here to bother anyone." The young guard's tone hardened. "Sir, this area is for paying members only. No offense, but this isn't a ranch or a truck stop." The words echoed in the quiet lounge. A few people looked up from their laptops, whispering. Benjamin exhaled slowly, his jaw tightening. He thought of his mother's voice, gentle, firm, faithful. "Son, the measure of a man is how he treats those who don't respect him." So he smiled again, though it hurt a little. "Son," he said quietly, "I've paid more than you'll ever know to be right here." Derek laughed under his breath. "Yeah? You pay with what? Hay bales?" Benjamin just looked at him. "With humility. Costs more than it looks." The guard rolled his eyes. "All right, that's enough. Let's not make a scene." Benjamin nodded. "That's wise." He turned and walked out of the lounge, hat in hand, boots echoing softly on the polished floor. Outside, he found a bench near the window. He sat down slowly, laying his duffel beside him. He could see the runway through the glass, small planes lifting into the sky one after another. For a moment, he just watched. He thought of the herds of cattle back home in Waco, of the sunrise over his land, of the laughter of workers he called family. And then he smiled. He'd been poor once, hungry once, forgotten once. He could handle a little disrespect. Inside the lounge, Derek was still chuckling. Man, the nerve. He really thought he had a pilot. The receptionist frowned slightly. He seemed nice, though. "Yeah, well, nice doesn't buy first-class access," Derek muttered. 10 minutes later, the automatic doors opened. A man in a crisp navy blue uniform walked in, wheeling a small suitcase. His pilot's wings gleamed on his chest. "Excuse me," he said to the receptionist. "I'm looking for Benjamin Carter." "Has he checked in yet?" The receptionist blinked. "I'm sorry, who?" Carter," the pilot repeated. "Owner of Carter Land and Cattle. He's scheduled for a private flight to Snow Paulo. We're prepped for departure." The room went dead quiet. Derek froze mid-step. "Wait, what?" The pilot looked around. He's an older gentleman, tall, wears a cowboy hat, brown boots. Derek's stomach dropped. I think he left." The pilot frowned. "Left? But I was told he was waiting in this lounge." No one spoke. Then the receptionist pointed weakly toward the window. "That's him. Over there." The pilot turned and spotted Benjamin through the glass, sitting on the bench, hat in hand, eyes on the sky. Without hesitation, he strode toward the doors. The glass doors opened with a hiss. "Mr. Carter," the pilot called. Benjamin turned, smiling. "Morning, Ryan." "Sir, I've been looking everywhere for you," the pilot said, relief in his voice. "We're fueled up and ready to go. Your jet's waiting on the runway." Benjamin stood, adjusting his hat. "Appreciate it, son." "Just enjoying the view." The pilot nodded respectfully. "Your staff's already on board, sir." "Good," Benjamin said softly. "Let's not keep them waiting." Every eye in the VIP lounge was glued to them through the window. The old man in dusty boots. The professional pilot calling him sir. The security guard frozen in silence. As Benjamin walked past the doors, he stopped briefly in front of Derek. "Son," he said gently, "you were doing your job. But next time, look with your heart before you look with your eyes." Derek's throat tightened. "Sir, I'm sorry. I didn't know." Benjamin smiled kindly. "That's the thing about humility. You never know who's teaching you the lesson until it's over." He tipped his hat and walked toward the private terminal, the pilot following respectfully behind. Inside the lounge, no one spoke for a long moment. Then, softly, the old woman who defended Benjamin earlier whispered, "That man just gave you all more of a sermon than you'll ever hear in church." Outside, Benjamin climbed into the black SUV that would take him to the tarmac. He leaned back in the seat, closed his eyes, and whispered a quiet prayer of thanks, not for the wealth he had, but for the strength to stay humble when the world gave him every reason not to. The clock on the wall ticked softly to 7:05 a meter, as Benjamin Carter sat on that cold steel bench outside the VIP lounge. He rested his duffel beside him, hands clasped, posture straight. To anyone watching, he might have looked like a man waiting for a bus, not a private jet. Travelers passed by, suits, sunglasses, expensive watches, all too busy to notice the quiet old man with the gentle eyes. But a few did notice, and some whispered. "That guy got kicked out of the lounge," one woman murmured to her husband as she walked by. "Yeah, I saw," he replied. "Guess they're cracking down on people sneaking in." Benjamin heard them. He didn't react. He'd lived too many years to waste breath explaining himself to those already certain they were right. Instead, he looked out through the tall windows. A golden plane rose into the morning sky, sunlight bouncing off its wings. He smiled faintly. "Pretty thing," he whispered. "Almost as pretty as a calf taking its first steps." The man sitting beside him, a traveler in a business suit, gave him a strange look, unsure if the comment was meant for him. Benjamin nodded politely. "You from around here, son?" The man shrugged. "Houston." Benjamin smiled. "Good folks down there. Hard workers." The man nodded absently, then turned back to his phone, clearly uninterested. Benjamin chuckled softly and looked down at his boots. They just don't make patience like they used to. Inside the lounge, Derek leaned on the counter, telling his coworkers the story for the 5th time. "I'm telling you, the guy walked in like he owned the place," he said, shaking his head. "Jeans, boots, the whole cowboy thing. Said he had a pilot waiting on him." The receptionist, Tracy, frowned. "He didn't seem like a bad person, Derek." "Yeah, well, he wasn't supposed to be there," Derek replied defensively. "We have rules. You let one guy in, next thing you know, the place is full of farmers and hitchhikers." Tracy sighed. "Still, you didn't have to embarrass him." Derek rolled his eyes. "He embarrassed himself. Look, I was polite. You told him it wasn't a ranch," she interrupted quietly. He paused, shrugging. "Okay, maybe I got a little snarky. But come on, look around. This is a luxury lounge, not a rodeo." From across the room, a passenger in a suit laughed. "You did the right thing, kid. Some people just don't belong in places like this." Derek grinned awkwardly, but something in him flickered, a brief discomfort, quickly buried under pride. Meanwhile, Benjamin sat silently, gazing at the runway. A janitor passed by, an older man with graying hair and tired eyes. "Morning, sir," the janitor said softly. Benjamin nodded. "Morning to you, friend." The janitor hesitated, then asked, "They kicked you out of there?" Benjamin smiled. "Guess I didn't look the part." The janitor shook his head. "Ain't right. You look like you've worked hard your whole life." "That should count for something," Benjamin chuckled. "Used to. These days, folks care more about polish than purpose." The janitor smiled sadly. "Ain't that the truth?" They sat in silence for a while. Two men from different worlds who somehow spoke the same language. Then Benjamin reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded $50 bill. "Here," he said, handing it to the janitor. "Get yourself some breakfast." The man blinked, taken aback. "Oh, I can't take that, sir." Benjamin smiled gently. "Then call it a tip for reminding me that decency still exists." Reluctantly, the janitor took it. "God bless you." Benjamin nodded. He already has. Back inside the lounge, a few minutes later, Derek's supervisor, Mr. Lawrence, approached. He was a tall man in his 50s with sharp glasses and a tone that sounded like authority. "Derek, I just got a complaint," he said. Derek stiffened. "From who?" "That woman sitting near the window. She said you threw someone out without cause." Derek frowned. "Oh, you mean that cowboy?" "Yeah, I did." "He didn't belong here." Lawrence sighed. "Did you check his credentials?" "He had some kind of black card." "Looked fake. Double quotes," Lawrence groaned. "And you just assumed it was?" Derek hesitated. "Come on, sir. You saw him. He looked like he didn't belong." Lawrence adjusted his tie. "Son, I don't pay you to decide who looks like they belong. I pay you to follow protocol." He glanced toward the window where Benjamin was still visible on the bench. "Go apologize to him before this becomes a bigger issue," Derek frowned. "You're kidding. Do it," Lawrence ordered. Derek sighed and made his way toward the doors, muttering under his breath. But as he reached for the handle, a group of wealthy passengers walked in, men in tailored suits, carrying sleek briefcases. "Hey, officer," one of them said. "There's some old ranch hand sitting out there. You might want to move him along." Derek froze. "Yeah, I know," he muttered. The man smirked. "Probably wandered in here looking for the wrong gate." They laughed and walked past him. Derek's stomach twisted slightly. For the first time, the laughter didn't feel good. Outside, Benjamin sat quietly, flipping through a small, worn Bible he carried everywhere. He turned to a page with underlined words. "Do not repay evil for evil. Do not be overcome by evil, but overcome evil with good." He smiled faintly. "You really don't make this easy, Lord," he whispered. A child nearby, maybe 5 or 6, tugged on his mother's hand, pointing at Benjamin. "Mommy, why's that cowboy sitting alone?" The woman smiled softly. "Maybe he's waiting for someone important, sweetheart." Benjamin heard her and looked up. "That's right," he said kindly. "Someone very important," the woman smiled. "Have a nice day, sir." "You too, ma'am." "You too." Back in the lounge, Derek stood at the counter again, glancing nervously outside. Tracy crossed her arms. "Aren't you gonna go apologize?" He sighed. "In a minute." "Derek, come on. You know you were out of line." He didn't respond. His pride wouldn't let him. Just then, the automatic doors hissed open. A crisp, commanding voice filled the room. "Excuse me," the man said, stepping forward, his pilot's uniform gleaming under the soft lights. "I'm looking for Mr. Benjamin Carter." The name echoed like thunder in the quiet lounge. The same men who'd laughed minutes ago fell silent. Even the receptionist stopped typing. Derek blinked. I think I saw him outside." The pilot frowned. "Outside? He should have been escorted in here." "He's the one who owns the jet on runway 5. The entire room froze. Benjamin Carter, the man they'd mocked. The one Derek had kicked out. The owner of the jet. The pilot stepped closer, his tone polite but firm. "Where exactly did you send him?" Derek stammered. He said he was waiting for a pilot." "I didn't think," the pilot interrupted sharply. "You didn't think. That's the problem." Without waiting for an answer, he turned toward the doors. "I'll find him myself." Through the glass, the onlookers saw the pilot walk straight toward the old man in boots. Benjamin looked up, smiled, and shook the man's hand warmly. The pilot bowed his head slightly, respect clear in his posture. Every face in the VIP lounge went pale. Even Lawrence, the supervisor, felt his knees weaken. Tracy whispered under her breath, "Oh my God." Derek swallowed hard. That's his pilot?" "Yep," one of the businessmen muttered, shaking his head. "And we just watched you throw his boss out of a VIP lounge." The silence that followed was heavier than any scolding could have been. Benjamin rose from the bench, adjusted his hat, and began walking calmly back toward the terminal doors, his pilot beside him. Inside the lounge, people straightened in their seats, pretending to check their phones, as if hiding from their own shame. And just as Benjamin reached the doors, he paused. He looked through the glass at the young security guard inside, the one who'd thrown him out. Their eyes met. Benjamin smiled kindly, nodded once, and tipped his hat. Then he walked away. The sound of polished shoes echoed across the marble floor as Captain Ryan Thompson approached the VIP terminal desk. Tall, composed, and dressed in a pristine navy blue pilot's uniform, he radiated calm authority, the kind that instantly changed the air in a room. He removed his cap and addressed the receptionist with a polite nod. "Good morning. I'm looking for Mr. Benjamin Carter." The name hit the room like a dropped glass. The businessman by the coffee machine stopped mid-sip. The receptionist blinked, unsure if she'd heard correctly. Even Derek, the security guard, straightened unconsciously. The receptionist stammered. He's outside, sir. Outside? The pilot repeated, his brow furrowing. Mayor Carter has VIP access. Why would he be outside? Derek stepped forward, forcing a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Sorry, Captain, is that the older gentleman in the hat? Looked kinda like a rancher? Captain Ryan turned slowly. Yes, that's him. Well, he came in earlier, Derek said quickly. There must have been some confusion about his credentials. The pilot's tone sharpened. Confusion? Derek nodded nervously. Yeah, his membership card looked. UH, unusual, The pilot cut him off, voice low and steady. That unusual card gives him full access to every executive lounge in this airport. He owns Carter Land and Cattle, the largest ranching operation in the state. And the jet sitting on runway 5 with his name on it? That's waiting on him. The color drained from Derek's face. Wait, what? The pilot adjusted his sleeves calmly. You just threw out the man who signs my paychecks. The silence that followed was absolute. Even the air seemed to stop moving. Outside, unaware of the commotion behind the glass, Benjamin Carter stood near the window, watching the sun climb higher over the airfield. He wasn't angry, not really. If anything, he looked thoughtful, like a man reflecting on how quickly people forget what matters. When he heard footsteps approaching, he turned to see Captain Ryan heading toward him, his stride urgent but respectful. Mr. Carter. Ryan called, relief flooding his voice. Benjamin smiled, tipping his hat. Morning, son. Sir, I'm so sorry for the delay, the pilot said, slightly out of breath. The crew's been ready for 15 minutes. We couldn't find you in the lounge. Benjamin chuckled softly. Well, that's 'cause they found me first. Ryan frowned, glancing toward the VIP room. Through the glass, a dozen faces stared back, shocked, frozen. The pilot's expression hardened. Sir, did they throw you out? Benjamin shrugged. Guess I didn't dress fancy enough for them. Ryan exhaled sharply, fury flashing across his face. That's unacceptable. Benjamin placed a hand on his shoulder. It's all right, son. They didn't know who I was. And maybe that's the lesson. Inside, Derek and his supervisor, Lawrence, stood stiff as statues. No one dared to speak. Through the glass, they watched the exchange. The rancher they dismissed, now being addressed with the kind of respect reserved for kings. The pilot handed Benjamin a clipboard. We've got clearance to depart whenever you're ready, sir. Benjamin nodded, signing his name with a smooth, practiced hand. Appreciate it, Ryan. You've been good to me. Always, sir, Ryan said sincerely. As Benjamin turned to leave, the pilot glanced at the stunned crowd behind the glass and shook his head in quiet disbelief. The automatic doors slid open again as Benjamin and Ryan stepped back into the VIP terminal. You could have heard a pin drop. The same businessmen who had laughed now looked away, pretending to check their phones. The receptionist's cheeks burned with embarrassment. And Derek, the young security guard, stood pale, sweating. Words stuck somewhere between his pride and his guilt. Benjamin stopped beside him. For a moment, no one breathed. Then Benjamin smiled gently and said, You must be the man who wanted to keep me comfortable outside. Derek swallowed hard. Sir, I didn't know. Benjamin raised a hand. I know you didn't. That's why I'm not angry. Derek blinked. You're not? Benjamin shook his head slowly. Son, if I got mad every time someone judged a man by his clothes, I'd be angry most of my life. And that's too heavy a thing to carry. Lawrence stepped forward nervously. Mr. Carter, please accept our deepest apologies. Benjamin interrupted softly. You don't owe me an apology, sir. But you owe your heart some reflection. His voice filled the quiet room, calm but firm. You see, respect isn't for the rich or the powerful. It's for the human being standing in front of you, no matter where they came from or what they look like. He paused, letting the words hang there. In my life, he continued, I've met folks in suits worth millions who couldn't look a janitor in the eye. And I've met janitors who prayed for the men that stepped on him. You tell me who's richer. A deep, uneasy silence fell. Even the businessmen who'd mocked him looked at the floor. Benjamin adjusted his hat and smiled at the receptionist. You've got a fine place here, ma'am. Keep it that way. Just remember, it's people, not polish, that makes a place worth being in. She nodded, eyes glossy. Yes, sir. He turned to Derek, whose eyes were wet with shame. Son, Benjamin said kindly, don't let pride make you smaller than you were born to be. A uniform means authority, not superiority. You remember that, and you'll go far. Derek's voice cracked. I don't deserve your kindness, sir. Benjamin smiled softly. Then it's good that grace ain't about deserving. He reached out his calloused hand. Derek hesitated, then took it, gripping tightly. Thank you, the young man whispered. Benjamin nodded. Now you've got a story you'll tell your kids one day, about the cowboy who taught you what class really looks like. Captain Ryan cleared his throat. Sir, we're cleared for takeoff. Your jet's waiting. Benjamin smiled. Then let's not keep her waiting. Cattle in clouds don't like delays. A few people chuckled softly, their guilt easing just enough to breathe again. As Benjamin and Ryan walked toward the terminal doors, whispers rippled through the room, shame mixed with admiration. The old woman from earlier, sitting quietly near the corner, turned to Derek and said, Son, that man just gave you a sermon without opening a Bible. Derek nodded slowly, tears threatening to fall. Yes, ma'am. I'll never forget it. Outside, as Benjamin and Ryan crossed the tarmac toward the waiting jet, a sleek white Gulfstream with Carter Air printed near the tail, the early sun shimmered off the wings like liquid gold. Benjamin paused at the stairs, taking one last look at the terminal. Through the glass, dozens of faces still watched him, the same faces that had doubted him. He smiled, lifted his hat slightly in a silent farewell, and said under his breath, Don't ever judge the worth of a man by the dirt on his boots. Then he climbed the steps slowly, each footfall steady and sure, like a man who carried no bitterness, only peace. Inside the jet, Ryan turned to him and said softly, You handled that better than anyone I've ever seen. Benjamin chuckled. Son, when you've been humbled by life, you don't need to humiliate anyone to feel tall. Ryan smiled. You really are one of a kind, sir. Benjamin looked out the window as the engines roared to life. No, son. I'm just proof that grace travels faster than judgment. The jet began to roll down the runway. Inside the VIP lounge, everyone still stared through the glass, some ashamed, some inspired. And Derek, standing frozen by the door, whispered to himself, He came in like a rancher and left like a king. The Gulfstream G700 stood gleaming under the Texas sun, engines purring softly, ready for flight. But Benjamin Carter hadn't boarded yet. He stood near the base of the stairs, speaking quietly with Captain Ryan Thompson, who'd already contacted the tower for clearance. Sir, Ryan said, I called ahead to confirm our flight path. Everything's clear. But the airport director wants to speak with you before we depart. Benjamin adjusted his hat. Director? About what? Ryan smiled faintly. Apparently, news travels faster than our jet. Benjamin chuckled. I suppose it does. Within minutes, a black SUV pulled up. Out stepped Edward Brooks, the director of operations for Dallas-Fort Worth International Airport, a man Benjamin had known for nearly 20 years through business dealings, agricultural conferences, and community projects. Ben, Edward called out as he approached, his voice a mix of embarrassment and concern. I just heard what happened. My staff briefed me. Came straight down here. Benjamin extended a hand warmly. Morning, Ed. Edward grasped it firmly, his tone regretful. I am so sorry, my friend. You didn't deserve that. Benjamin smiled. Nobody does. Edward sighed heavily. I'm going to fire that security guard, no hesitation. This kind of disrespect. Benjamin raised a hand, stopping him. Don't. Edward blinked. What? Don't fire him, Benjamin repeated gently. He doesn't need punishment. He needs perspective. They stood there for a long moment in the warm breeze, the distant roar of departing planes filling the silence. Edward crossed his arms. Ben, you've got a heart too big for your own good. That kid embarrassed you in front of half the terminal. Benjamin looked toward the glass-walled lounge where the scene had unfolded. He could still see silhouettes moving inside, workers, passengers, maybe even Derek himself, probably reliving every cruel word. Ed, he said softly, I've been poor. I've been laughed at. I've been judged. You can't teach humility through humiliation, but you can teach it through mercy. Edward exhaled slowly. You always were more preacher than businessman, Benjamin grinned. Comes with being raised by a missionary mama. Edward tilted his head. You ever tell me that story about Brazil? Benjamin smiled, his eyes distant. Not the whole of it. They walked to a shaded bench beside the runway, where Benjamin's jet shimmered in the background like a patient angel. Benjamin removed his hat, set it on his knee, and began quietly. I was born in a little town outside São Paulo, he said. My parents were poor, good people, but struggling to feed 5 mouths. My daddy was a field worker. My mama washed clothes by the river. They loved me, but they couldn't keep me. He looked out at the horizon, voice calm but heavy. When I was 6, a missionary couple came to our town. Samuel and Mary Carter. Americans from Texas. They built wells, handed out food, taught the kids English. My mama volunteered to help them cook. They saw me one day skinny, sickly, barely walking from fever, and they took me to a small clinic they built. That's how I survived. Edward listened in silence, the wind tugging gently at his tie. When it came time for the missionaries to return home, Benjamin continued, my parents did something I never understood as a boy. They let me go. They said, our son belongs to God, and if God's calling him to another land, who are we to hold him back? His voice wavered slightly. I remember my mama kneeling in the dirt, holding my face and saying, never forget where you came from, Mufilho. And never forget who you belong to. He swallowed hard, clearing his throat. The Carters adopted me legally soon after, brought me to Texas, raised me in the church, taught me about ranching, stewardship, generosity. They had no children of their own, but they gave me everything, faith, education, opportunity. And their last name. Edward leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. And now you own half the land between Waco and Amarillo, he said softly. Benjamin chuckled. More than I ever needed, that's for sure. When Samuel passed, I took over the ranch, but I kept their values. Work hard, stay humble, and let God own the rest. That's what my mama used to say. He paused, eyes narrowing slightly in thought. That boy, Derek, I saw something in him. Pride, yes, but fear too. He's trying to prove he belongs somewhere. Funny thing is, that's how pride starts. It's just fear wearing a different hat. Edward nodded slowly. So you want me to what? Give him another chance? Benjamin smiled. No, give him a lesson worth remembering. Later that morning, Edward arranged a small meeting in the airport's administrative office. Just Benjamin, Edward, Derek, and the lounge receptionist, Tracy. Derek looked nervous, his uniform suddenly too tight, his face pale. Mr. Carter, he began immediately. Sir, I just want to say how sorry I am. I judged you. I disrespected you. I was wrong. Benjamin studied him quietly for a moment, then spoke softly. You're right, son, you were wrong. But you're also human. And humans make mistakes. Derek nodded, unable to meet his eyes. You could have had me fired. Or worse. Benjamin smiled gently. What would that teach you? That rich men always win. Derek blinked, unsure how to respond. Benjamin leaned forward, voice steady but kind. Son, I grew up poor. Dirt poor. I know what it feels like to be invisible. But let me tell you something. God sees every person the same, from the janitor to the man flying the jet. He doesn't look at shoes or suits. He looks at the heart. You remember that, and you'll never have to apologize for your eyes again. Derek's eyes shimmered. Sir, I don't know what to say. Benjamin chuckled softly. Start with thank you, but not to me. To the one who keeps giving us second chances. The room went quiet. Even Edward felt a lump in his throat. Tracy wiped a tear discreetly. Benjamin stood slowly, placing his hat back on. Now, if you'll excuse me, I've got a long flight to Brazil and a few prayers to say before I get there. He reached out and shook Derek's hand firmly. Be better than yesterday, son. That's all any of us can do. Derek nodded, voice breaking. Yes, sir. As Benjamin turned to leave, Edward called after him. You sure you don't want me to issue a formal apology to the media? This could go public fast. Benjamin smiled without turning back. Let it. The world could use a little more grace in the headlines. On the drive to the tarmac, Edward looked at him and said, You know, Ben, you just turned an airport incident into a sermon. Benjamin chuckled. Maybe that's what God had in mind all along. Think the guard learned his lesson? Edward asked. Benjamin's eyes softened. If he didn't today, he will someday. Life has a way of repeating its lessons until we get them right. When they reached the plane, Benjamin paused before boarding. He turned to Edward one last time. Do me a favor, Ed. Start a dignity program for your staff. Teach them how to treat people, not passengers, but people. Edward nodded. You have my word, Benjamin smiled. Then maybe next time, someone like me won't have to teach it the hard way. He climbed the steps slowly, one hand on the railing, the other holding his hat. Halfway up, he looked back and said, Tell that young man I forgive him. And tell him if he ever needs work that teaches humility, I've got 1,000 acres that'll do just fine. Edward grinned. You're something else, Ben. Benjamin smiled. Just a servant, Ed. Just a servant. Inside the cabin, Benjamin settled into his seat. Captain Ryan looked back. Everything all right, sir? Benjamin nodded. It is now. As the engines rumbled to life, he gazed out the window, at the airport, at the lounge, at the tiny people below. He whispered quietly to himself, Thank you, Lord, for teaching me that grace isn't just received, it's practiced. The jet began to taxi down the runway, sunlight glinting off its wings like a promise. It had been nearly 2 weeks since the incident at Dallas-Fort Worth International Airport, but the story had traveled farther than Benjamin Carter's jet ever could. Someone had filmed it the moment Captain Ryan approached, the pilot calling Benjamin sir, the stunned faces in the lounge, and the old rancher's calm, gracious words. Respect isn't for the rich or the powerful. It's for the human being standing in front of you. By the time Benjamin landed in Brazil, the video had already gone viral. Millions watched, shared, and commented. Hashtag The Humble Rancher trended nationwide. News anchors replayed the clip on morning television with captions like, Texas billionaire teaches a lesson in grace. Benjamin didn't know any of it until his assistant called him while he was visiting a small orphanage outside. Snow Paulo, one his foundation helped fund. Mr. Carter, she said breathlessly over the phone, you're all over the news. Every major outlet's running your story. Benjamin sighed softly. Of course they are. World loves a scandal and a saint, sometimes in the same breath. His assistant laughed. Sir, people are calling you the cowboy preacher of patience. Benjamin chuckled. Well, that's a mouthful. Hope they remember the message more than the man. Back in Texas, Edward Brooks, the airport director, sat in his office surrounded by reporters and emails from across the country. Every airline executive, church leader, and journalist wanted to talk about the humble rancher, but Benjamin hadn't spoken to a single one of them. He refused interviews. Instead, he sent a short written statement that was published in the Dallas Morning News. To those who've asked for comment, There's nothing to defend, nothing to condemn. We all stumble. The only thing worth repeating is kindness. Benjamin Carter. The quote spread faster than the video itself. Meanwhile, Derek, the young security guard, hadn't slept much since that morning. He'd watched the video hundreds of times, not out of pride, but shame. Every time he saw Benjamin's calm face, every time he heard those gentle words, "Look with your heart before you look with your eyes," it cut a little deeper. The airport hadn't fired him, thanks to Benjamin's request. But the whispers among co-workers didn't stop. "Hey, it's the guy who kicked out the billionaire," one employee joked as he passed by. Another muttered, "Hope he's learned how to check an ID." Derek said nothing. He just kept showing up, working harder than anyone, volunteering for extra shifts, anything to rebuild what he'd broken. But the guilt didn't fade. Until one afternoon, he got a call from Edward's office. "Derek," said Edward's secretary, "Mr. Carter wants to meet you." Personally, Derek's throat went dry. What? "He's back in Texas, said he has something for you." A week later, Derek arrived at Carter Land and Cattle, Benjamin's massive ranch near Waco. The entrance stretched for miles, wide fields, oak fences, cattle grazing peacefully under the big Texas sky. As he drove up the long dirt road, he spotted a man in a straw hat standing by a wooden fence, watching a herd move through the pasture. Benjamin Carter turned and waved. "Afternoon, son." Derek stepped out, nervous. "Mr. Carter, I can't tell you how sorry I am." Benjamin held up a hand, smiling. "You already told me that, son. Now let's talk about something better." "Better?" Benjamin nodded toward the open land. "You said in your apology you wanted to change. Here's your chance. I'm starting a new program out here, something called Second Chance Ranch. We take folks who made mistakes, young people, veterans, even ex-employees, and we teach them how to work the land. Give them a sense of purpose again." Derek blinked. "You're offering me a job?" Benjamin nodded. "If you want it." Derek's eyes filled with tears. "Sir, I don't deserve." Benjamin smiled kindly. "Grace ain't about deserving, remember?" The young man swallowed hard, then nodded. "Yes, sir." "I'll take it." "Good," Benjamin said, clapping him gently on the shoulder. "First rule, work hard. Second rule, be kind. Third rule," he looked at him with a grin, "never judge a cowboy by his boots." Derek laughed through his tears. "Yes, sir." That same month, Edward Brooks officially launched the Benjamin Carter Dignity Initiative, a training program for all airport personnel in Texas and beyond. Its slogan came directly from Benjamin's own words: "Protocol protects procedures. Respect protects people." Within a year, 32 airports across the country had adopted the initiative. Employee culture shifted. Training videos used Benjamin's story as a case study in empathy, diversity, and humility. And quietly, the man himself kept serving. He never appeared on talk shows, never gave motivational speeches. He just kept building schools, orphanages, and community programs under the Carter Foundation. One day, while walking through a barn with Derek and some volunteers, Benjamin stopped to pet a calf that had been born the night before. The group gathered around, listening as he spoke softly. "You see this little one? Born weak, legs shaky, eyes barely open. You know what keeps her alive?" Someone said, "The mother?" Benjamin nodded. "That's part of it. But it's also the herd. They make space for her. Protect her till she's strong enough to walk on her own." He looked at Derek. "That's what we're supposed to do for each other. Make space. Give grace." Derek smiled. "You really live everything you preach, don't you, sir?" Benjamin chuckled. "Try to. Not always easy when the world's loud. But the quiet truth never changes." As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky gold and violet, Benjamin stood on the fence line, watching the cattle graze. In the distance, he could hear laughter, workers, families, children, the sound of life that his wealth had helped nurture. He bowed his head and whispered, "Thank you, Lord, for turning a moment of pride into a lifetime of purpose." The wind carried the words across the fields like a hymn. Weeks later, Derek stood in front of a small group of new trainees at Second Chance Ranch. He wore jeans, boots, and a white work shirt with the Carter Foundation logo stitched on the chest. "Welcome," he said, smiling nervously. "Some of you might know me as the guy who made a big mistake a while back. I judged someone by their appearance. Thought I knew who belonged where. Turns out, I was wrong." He paused, looking at the open faces before him. "The man I disrespected didn't just forgive me, he gave me a job, a purpose. He taught me that respect is free to give, and the people who give it the most are usually the ones who've been denied it." The group listened silently, hanging on his every word. "So if you ever find yourself tempted to look down on someone," Derek said softly, "just remember, the richest heart might be hidden under the dustiest boots." A few months later, Benjamin received a letter from Derek. It read, "Mr. Carter, I just wanted to thank you. You didn't just forgive me, you rebuilt me. I used to think dignity was about authority. You showed me it's about grace. Your student, Derek." Benjamin folded the letter carefully and placed it inside his Bible, right next to a verse he'd underlined years ago. "Do not be overcome by evil, but overcome evil with good." Romans 12:21. He closed the book, smiled, and whispered, "Still learning, Lord, still learning." The years rolled by softly, like dust carried across the Texas plains. The story of the humble rancher from Waco never quite faded, it simply grew roots. Newspapers had long stopped running the headlines, but Benjamin Carter's name still carried quiet weight. Not as a celebrity, but as a symbol of dignity, of faith, of a better way to live. Every year, more airports adopted the Carter Dignity Initiative, not because of pressure, but because of proof. Reports showed fewer complaints, more smiles, and a culture of respect that spread through terminals from New York to Los Angeles. Posters began to appear in staff break rooms with Benjamin's quote printed in bold. "Protocol protects procedures. Respect protects people." It became a motto, not just for employees, but for travelers too. And somewhere in Texas, the man who started it all still lived simply, quietly, contentedly. At Carter Land and Cattle, Benjamin's days began before sunrise. He still woke to the sound of roosters, still prayed before breakfast, still wore the same hat his adoptive father had given him when he was 15. He didn't own a smartphone, didn't care for fancy cars. His favorite seat was still the old wooden bench on the porch where he'd sit at dawn, Bible open, coffee steaming, whispering his morning prayer. "Thank you, Lord, for one more sunrise, one more chance to serve." Even after all the wealth, all the land, all the power, humility remained his greatest inheritance. One morning, he received a letter from the Department of Transportation. It was formal, printed on official stationery, but the message inside was simple. "Mr. Carter, the United States Congress has voted unanimously to recognize your contribution to ethics and equality in civil aviation. Effective immediately, Dallas-Fort Worth International Airport will dedicate Terminal C as the Benjamin Carter Wing, in honor of your example of grace under prejudice." Benjamin stared at the paper for a long moment, then laughed softly. When his housekeeper, Ellen, asked what was funny, he handed her the letter. "Looks like they're naming a piece of concrete after me," he said. She smiled warmly. "You deserve it." He shook his head. "Deserves a dangerous word, Ellen. Grace don't work that way." The dedication day came bright and clear. Crowds gathered in the new terminal, airport staff, politicians, pastors, children from Carter Foundation schools, even airline CEOs. Benjamin, now in his 70s, arrived wearing the same dusty boots that had once gotten him thrown out of that very building. Derek stood beside him, no longer a security guard, but the program director for the Carter Dignity Initiative. He adjusted the microphone nervously before introducing his mentor. "Ladies and gentlemen," Derek began, "I once judged this man by his clothes. And in doing so, I almost missed the kindest heart I've ever known. Today, I get to call him not just my teacher, but my friend." Applause filled the hall. Benjamin stepped forward slowly, tipping his hat with a gentle smile. He looked out at the crowd, hundreds of faces from every walk of life, and began to speak in his calm, deliberate drawl. "I'm not much for speeches, so I'll keep this short. Years ago, I sat on a cold bench outside this very airport, just a man in boots and dust, minding my business. Someone thought I didn't belong. And for a moment, I believed them. But the good Lord has a funny way of turning insults into invitations." The crowd chuckled softly, listening closer. "That day taught me something. It reminded me that respect isn't a reward, it's a responsibility. You can build an empire, own a jet, run a company, but if you can't look a man in the eye and call him brother, you've missed the point." He paused, his voice thick with emotion. "We've all judged. We've all been judged. But mercy turns both into teachers." The audience was silent. Some wiped tears. Benjamin smiled faintly. "So if you see someone today who looks like they don't belong, try something radical. Smile at them. Ask their name. Maybe they're not lost. Maybe they're just waiting to be seen." The crowd erupted in applause, thunderous, heartfelt, endless. Derek stood beside him, tears streaming down his face. After the ceremony, a young reporter approached Benjamin for a brief comment. "Mr. Carter," she said, holding her recorder, "what do you hope people remember about you when you're gone?" Benjamin smiled softly, adjusting his hat. "I hope they don't." The reporter blinked. "Sir?" He chuckled. "I hope they remember the message instead, that kindness don't cost a dime, but it pays eternal dividends." Then he tipped his hat, shook her hand, and walked away. Months later, Benjamin's health began to fade. The long days on the ranch had caught up to him. The hands that once carried hay bales now trembled as he held his coffee cup each morning. But his heart never grew tired. He still prayed, still smiled, still thanked the Lord for every breath. When the end came, it was peaceful. He passed away one quiet evening as the sun dipped over the pastures, the sky painted in fire and gold. His Bible rested open on his lap. The pages turned to one simple verse: "Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth." Matthew 5:5. And Benjamin Carter, the boy from Brazil, the son of missionaries, the man in dusty boots, had done exactly that. Epilogue: the legacy 1 year later at the Benjamin Carter Wing in Dallas-Fort Worth. Travelers rushed past a bronze statue near the entrance. It showed an elderly man in a cowboy hat, sitting on a bench, one hand resting on a Bible, the other tipping his hat in greeting. A plaque beneath it read, "Benjamin Carter 1954-2025. He taught the world that dignity wears dusty boots." Every day, airport staff walked by it and, without realizing it, smiled more, helped more, saw more. And every time someone paused to read the quote, they'd whisper, "Respect protects people." And somewhere, maybe in heaven, maybe carried on the Texas wind, a quiet voice would chuckle and say, "Now that's how you fix an airport."